August 2nd, 2007. At a McDonald's in Oakland, California during its morning breakfast hours, journalist Chauncey Bailey is exiting through its doors. Thus far, it's been a typical morning commute. He liked to walk to this franchise location situated on 14th Street in Oakland's downtown before going to work in his office. Occasionally, he would buy those without housing coffee to provide them some small comfort. Despite being recently named editor-in-chief of the African-American newspaper The Oakland Post, Chauncey was in the middle of researching and writing a story of a local business's precarious finances and bankruptcy. Chauncey had been investigating this once respected family business for a long time, and its brimming controversies could not be concealed forever. Those who worked with or knew Chauncey sang nothing but his praises as an earnest man trying to provide essential news to Oakland. Chauncey would never ultimately finish the exposé he had been tirelessly working on, although the consequences of it would be felt before any article even made it to print. While Chauncey is walking on 14th Street, a white van with two men, one a driver and another a passenger, parks near the walking Chauncey. This little stretch of 14th Street will be renamed Chauncey Bailey Way for what occurs next. Quick content warning for the rest of today's episode, as there are frequent mentions of various crimes from violence to abuse of women and children. Those inside the vehicle had been waiting and watching for him. The passenger wears a ski mask. He gets out and approaches Chauncey, who is undoubtedly confused. The masked man carries a shotgun. A witness recalled that Chauncey could only say, quote, "Please don't kill me." The first shot tears through Chauncey's chest. Two more shots obliterate Chauncey's head as he lays on the ground. The trigger man hurriedly scurries back to his accomplice inside the van, who is now the getaway driver. The van flees the freshly christened crime scene. Chauncey lays dead. Panicked passerby sought to alert authorities. This was no robbery gone wrong, but an assassination. However, this was not the first killing that had been sanctioned by the organization who Chauncey was investigating. Why did this happen? Well, the domino effect arguably started all the way back in 1971, with an oddly titled business that opened its doors in Oakland's San Pablo Avenue. Its name, Your Black Muslim Bakery. The business became the epicenter of controversy, organized crime, and a cult that lasted decades. This is the torrid saga of a real-life little shop of horrors. Welcome to Historical Detour. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Consider pledging to my Patreon. The man who founded Your Black Muslim Bakery was born with a name he would come to discard as a relic of white enforced slavery. Joseph Stevens was born in Northeast Texas in late 1935 to an African-American family. Seeking greener economic pastures in the 1950s, his family would move to Oakland, California, a city whose black community was particularly prominent and politically active during the Civil Rights era. This city would define Joseph for the rest of his life. After attending the local technical high school, Joseph would join the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. He settled for some time in Berkeley and Santa Barbara, attempting to manage barbershops and beauty salons. However, 1964 would be a spiritual turning point for Joseph. He and his brother Billy would become followers of the Nation of Islam, which, despite its name and some terminology, was not any form of mainstream Islamic practice. The NOI was a black supremacist religion founded by the enigmatic Wallace Fard Muhammad in 1930. Watch Tor's Cabinet of Curiosities for more details on the subject. By 1964, the Nation of Islam had established chapters in California. Its tenets of embracing black identity, black separatism, independence, and nationalism had appealed to thousands of African Americans who were stymied and suffering from poverty, crime, and systemic racism. Joseph removed his last name of Stevens. This was a requirement of the NOI, who viewed Western last names as inherited from enslavers. He took upon the name Captain Joseph X. Joseph, additionally, was most directly influenced by Elijah Muhammad, the then head of the NOI. Joseph for decades kept portraits of Elijah in his businesses and temple. In 1968, Joseph began a new career path. The NOI enforced not only a rigid social and dress code, but also one with many dietary restrictions. Outside of prohibition on pork, many baked goods are not permitted to be eaten by NOI members, due to white flour and artificial additives also being forbidden or discouraged. Seeing a ready market of prospective black and NOI customers, Joseph opened his first Your Black Muslim bakery in Santa Barbara, California, which sold natural goods. Coincidentally, that same year in Santa Barbara, Bertie and Wendell Scott, two NOI associates of Joseph, would be found shot dead after allegedly informing other NOI members of an illegal finance scam masterminded by Joseph. In 1971, Joseph would relocate his business to Oakland. On the menu, one could expect to find not only confectionery staples of the NOI such as bean pie, but also vegetarian and white meat hot sandwiches. Sodas, red meat, and most named brand items were not sold within the bakery. Instead, virtually everything was made in-house. Sometime in the 70s, he would adopt yet another new name, Yusuf Ali Bey. Yusuf felt the name conveyed more power, as Bey was an aristocratic title. Tensions, however, were rising between Yusuf Bey and other NOI members. While Yusuf was personally vehemently bigoted against whites, he gladly accepted money and advertised to white customers, a policy which many other NOI leaders and businessmen disagreed with. This pragmatic policy of Yusuf paid off, as the chain became renowned in the San Francisco Bay Area. Over the following years, he opened several more bakeries. Oakland's International Airport and Oakland Coliseum, the home of the MLB athletics team, each hosted a Your Black Muslim bakery location. Additionally, Bey's business provided baked goods and products to over 100 local supermarkets and grocery stores. Also during this period, Yusuf's brother Billy, a minister of the NOI, with Yusuf established the 26B NOI Mosque in Oakland. While maintaining the standard NOI theology and sumptuary codes, Yusuf controlled his temple and congregation outside the wider NOI movement. Outside the bakery headquarters, he ordered a speaking stage constructed where he would speak regularly to his followers or potential converts. Numbers are unclear, but there were likely hundreds of members of this cult. Many converts who joined Yusuf's temple would take on the surname of Bey in recognition of his patriarchal role and be recognized as spiritually his children. This can lead to some very confusing news coverage, as it then becomes unclear who is a blood relation to Yusuf and who isn't unless clarified. In day-to-day business operations, he relied upon numerous converts to manage his businesses. In the 1980s, as Yusuf's prominence in Oakland's black community increased, he would broadcast recorded Sunday sermons every week on a regional cable channel. This program, True Solutions, would regularly include Bey's ramblings on NOI teachings of black supremacism and even rants against mainstream Islam. He berated some of their number who apparently owned liquor stores, which to him destroyed black communities. However, other more relatable messages of black empowerment and sobriety made him extremely popular generally in the San Francisco Bay Area, especially among its black communities. Many employees of his businesses also were men with prior criminal convictions. Bey claimed that he was merely providing a means for these men to rehabilitate themselves. However, he also ensured their loyalty, as he was one of the few employers who destitute and desperate men could rely on for a paycheck. Many, in theory, would be willing to break a leg or two on Bey's behalf. Many of the converts lived in buildings owned by Yusuf with their families. Yusuf was seen by elected city officials as an important city figure who could drum up vital votes from Oakland's black community and his own congregation. In return for his endorsements, local law enforcement and public servants of the city allegedly turned a blind eye to questionable happenings involving the bakery and Yusuf Bey's personal matters. It was April 1982 when the first unsolved murder connected to the bakery occurred. It was a delivery driver, Ronald Allen. He had been killed from a shotgun blast to the head. He had been dumped near a Berkeley dump. Relatives of Allen claimed they saw him with employees of the bakery shortly before his death. One retired investigator claimed certain members of the bakery were prime suspects, but there was not enough physical evidence to press charges. In 2005, a female survivor of Bey claimed she had heard of an employee stealing money from the business be executed. The details closely align with Allen's demise. The next death occurred in June 1986. Peter Kaufman, a bakery employee, was found dead in his van. There were 2 gunshot wounds. He was merely 3 blocks away from the bakery. Police would rule the killing a random robbery, and it remains unsolved. However, testimony years later would suggest a different motive for Kaufman's demise. Yusuf Bey was not monogamous. In fact, in one of his few breaks from formal NOI doctrine, he maintained relationships with the various women who lived with him. Occasionally in the press they are often labeled wives, although I personally would avoid that term. With these women, he had numerous children, 42 in fact. Allegedly, extensive welfare fraud occurred as benefits were improperly claimed, nominally on behalf of the children. Yusuf, whatever pristine image he had in public, did not apply in his domestic life. In 1988, 3 of the women left Yusuf and took with them 9 of the children. Despite their accusations of abuse, no charges were filed. Horrifyingly, it is alleged by some survivors who have spoken that Yusuf had fostered them as minors and were assaulted by him. It has been claimed in various civil lawsuits and depositions that Yusuf regularly abused young children, even at the bakery. Kaufman, the baker killed in '86, according to one survivor, had been taken out due to witnessing Yusuf Bey himself abusing a male child in his office within the bakery. In 1992, Bey registered a new security firm, Your Black Muslim Bakery Security Department. Their nominal purpose was to defend his business assets. Functionally, however, it was a paramilitary wing of his ministry that brutally enforced Bey's will or retaliated against opponents. Many of the men hired were convicted felons, many with prior experience in inflicting violence. The 90s were the height of Bey's business ventures. These now included, quote, 8 bakery outlets and several wholesale clients. He and members of his bakery family operated at least 8 other businesses, including dry cleaning, laundry, grocery, elementary school, and security companies, and a non-profit, end quote. The 90s, however, also saw major cracks begin to appear in Yusuf Bey's influence in the region. Anti-gay statements Bey had made caused a number of San Francisco grocery stores to cease doing business with him in 1993. 1994 would be a storied year for Yusuf. His son Akbar would die in a dispute with a drug dealer. One of Yusuf's spiritually adopted sons, Nadir, and dozens of others would capture and torture a Nigerian man they claimed scammed them in a realty deal. They held this man in an apartment complex and tortured him. Being alerted, over 40 police arrived at the complex to rescue the captive. At least 30 of Yusuf's men engaged in a brawl with police before managing to rescue the hostage. Nadir, a key instigator in this horrific incident, merely received 6 months house arrest. Yusuf Bey ran for mayor of Oakland. The publicity generated caused greater scrutiny. An interfaith coalition of Christians, Orthodox Muslims, and Jewish residents of the Bay Area denounced Yusuf publicly. The final election had Yusuf gain a mere 5% of the vote, still 5% too high in my opinion. 1996 would see the city of Oakland provide a $1 million loan to Nadir Bey, who had been convicted of the kidnapping crime. Nadir claimed he would create a company known as EM Health Services to train home health aides. No facilities were actually established. Instead, the money went to Nadir, members of the Bey family, and various businesses involved with the bakery. Despite the loan never being repaid, no criminal charges were filed even after an FBI probe. Troubles with the IRS occurred, with unpaid taxes from the 90s totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was only in the last days of life that Yusuf Bey felt any severe repercussions from the law. Numerous women who had been assaulted by Bey came forward. 4 of these women gave testimony. Paternity testing confirmed Bey fathered their children when they were younger than 14. It was September 19, 2002, when an arrest warrant was issued for Yusuf Bey. He turned himself in to be taken into custody. However, there would be no trial. On the 30th of September 2003, Yusuf Bey died of prostate cancer, which had been ravaging his body. When Yusuf died, his heirs fought over the spoils of his bakery empire. 2 broad factions emerged. Senior followers and converts to the family competed with the ambitious children of Yusuf, who had come of age and felt entitled to their father's kingdom. Wajid Bey, a senior accountant of the company, was personally designated the successor of Yusuf. After briefly assuming the role of leader, Wajid disappeared in early 2004. He was found dead months later. The death was later ruled to be a homicide. One of Yusuf's biological sons, Antar, claimed ownership over his father's businesses and leadership almost immediately after Wajid's disappearance. Antar was 22 years old. Another spiritual son of Yusuf and the bakery chief of security, John Bey, feared for his life as he feuded with Antar. Ensuring his family was moved safely, John would be ambushed by 3 men and shot multiple times in June 2005 at their safe house. He would survive, however, and would flee Oakland with his wife and children. Antar himself in October 2005 would meet a violent end. The gunman would be caught for a change. Alphonza Phillips, it was argued by police, merely wanted to rob Antar of hubcaps on his car. Some speculate, however, that Alphonza had been hired by a third party, albeit this is uncertain. Yusuf Bey IV was yet another son of Yusuf. He replaced his brother Antar as head of the bakery. Yusuf IV was 19, inexperienced, and woefully incapable of managing the businesses of his father. Yusuf IV would begin a brief but horrifying reign of terror. As a fundamentalist of his father's cult, Yusuf IV would mastermind many crimes nominally on behalf of the religious tenets championed by his father. In a petty move, he even had a car vandalized which belonged to his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. He had the car littered with bullet holes. It would be the summer of '07 that the crescendo of violence reached its peak. In July 8, 2007, Odell Robertson Jr. would be murdered in North Oakland. He was an uncle of the man who killed Antar. 4 days later, in the morning hours of July 12th, Michael J. Willis, a sous chef and part-time musician, would be found shot dead near a bakery location. It would be on August 2nd when Yusuf ordered the assassination of Chauncey Bailey for looking into the misdeeds of the Bay Group as his role as a journalist. However, on August 3rd, 1 day after Chauncey's death, the bakery would be raided and shut down due to health code violations. Facing bankruptcy since 2006, and despite support from various local politicians, the Your Black Muslim Bakery would close permanently by August 9th. Many of the same firearms had been used in the crimes previously mentioned. Once those were traced to Yusuf IV and various associates, they would be arrested. Devondre Broussard, the triggerman of Chauncey, in exchange for a lighter sentence, testified that Yusuf IV ordered the murders of '07. Antoine Mackey would also be implicated in the murders. Yusuf Bey IV and Mackey were sentenced to life in prison for their litany of crimes in 2011. Undoubtedly, not all of the members involved in innumerable crimes have been brought to justice. Various members and associates of the Bey organization continue to run afoul of the law, from Yusuf Bey IV's attorney to the family engaging in contract defrauding, financial fraud, and identity theft in the temple founded by Yusuf. The legacy of Yusuf Bey is uniformly negative. Even after death, his successors irrevocably damaged or ended lives. Though this is an obscure topic, it highlights uncomfortable topics of racism, radicalism, and the poisonous influence of a multi-generational cult of personality turned criminal organization. This vid would not have been possible without the online Chauncey Bailey Project, a collection of investigative articles and media that have chronicled the Your Black Muslim Bakery saga. They made this in honor of their colleague, Chauncey Bailey.